Hello, welcome everybody to another weekly session from the Verizon's 5G lab. My name is Junaid Islam. Thank you for joining. Today is going to be an exciting session, a little nerdy, a little state of the art, but that's why we're here. So you won't be disappointed. Let me turn on my PowerPoint here, and you'll be able to see it. So today we're very lucky to be talking to some of our security leaders here at Verizon. We've got two very important people. Alex Schleger actually runs our security practice at Verizon and actually has a number of roles in addition to working with our largest customers. He actually sets the tone of security in the company itself, and he's going to provide a broad view of our secure by default strategy, which is key to the company. We at Verizon, we take security really seriously, and to us, it's not an afterthought. We want to integrate security into everything ahead of time. And once following up with Alex, we've got Lee Sattler, our distinguished engineer, who's going to talk about quantum key distribution. Quantum key is a new topic you might have heard about. You might have confused it with quantum computing, quantum safe encryption. But I think by the end of this session, you'll not only learn about quantum key distribution, but going back to Alex's introduction, how it fits into the broader architecture. So with that, Alex, if you can see this, would love to get your thoughts about what does Verizon think about security at a corporate level. And obviously there's a lot of cyber attacks, and then you need countermeasures. How is Verizon pulling it all together into a service that is the best in the industry?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Junaid and Lee, for having me on your session and kind of setting the stage, if you like, for the talk that you're giving today. Look, there is seismic changes happening in the security industry as we speak. And I almost have to go back 5-6 years when we saw that security became more and more dominant as more and more commerce moved into the digital space, and security stopped being an afterthought and became more centric to risk enterprise, right? So more and more companies over these time have looked at security more and more as a function of enterprise risk. And with legislation and regulation coming along with that the last couple of years, we really think different about security today. Now, to your point, what is accelerating the security movement in our thinking is really 5G, mobile edge compute, and more importantly, the use cases that 5G and Mech will enable. SASE is also a very hot topic at the moment, and you will see how these topics are starting to intersect. But to stay at 5G and the Mech use cases, I think one of the big difference that we will see from a security and risk perspective is If we look at past breaches, they were dominantly financially motivated, and the damage to these breaches were of financial nature. But what we see with 5G and mobile edge compute, and in particular the use cases, is we're looking at potential much high risk outcome that could even endanger human lives. You might have seen the Wired magazine article, I think it was 3 weeks ago, with a hospital in Düsseldorf that the first time publicly attributed a patient's death to a ransomware attack. Now, if you look at 5G and the use cases, think of autonomous driving, think of smart communities, think of mobile healthcare, then we're looking at risk scenarios that go beyond pure financial damage, and as I said, might have direct impact on human health and human well-being. And therefore, we are trying to incorporate that risk-centric view on security and technology in an accelerated manner. What I mean with that is we are increasingly looking at the use case, and we try to work backwards from the use case. And what I mean with that is, if you look at, let me give you two examples of use cases. One is edge-enabled mobile gaming, and the other is mobile healthcare. Now, I hope you agree that the potential impact of a breach in these two scenarios is significantly different in sense of I might not have, I might be able to drive a slightly lower posture and control for the gaming example versus the mobile healthcare example. Can we go to the next slide? So ultimately, what we are looking at is as we enable these new use cases, how do all these technological developments, how do they come together? Infrastructure as code, right? And us adopting more and more default controls of IAC environments is an important component. The edge-enabled threat detection. To my previous point around real-time enterprise with 5G, and how do we become more efficient in near real-time detection and automating response? How do we protect workload directly at the edge in sense of confidential computing? And the topic for today is how do we secure the transport side? Now, SASE is something that is evolving, and we'll see it maturing over the next couple of years, where we deeply integrate security with network. But at the same time, we need to go beyond and look what other technologies do we have at our disposal in order to basically harden the security posture, help companies and customers to reduce risk, and ultimately increase consumer confidence that these new capabilities and technologies are safe to use. So as we go into today's session, think about the left side of this picture as we transport payload, as we need to protect payload, as we need to enable complementary technologies to, for example, software-defined perimeter. This is an area where especially you, Junaid, in lead, right? You are leading the research and the engagement here. And this is maybe something that many people don't know, that how much we actually actively invest into R&D in security, right? We work closely with MITRE, we work with MIT, we work with Google X. And therefore, I think it's an exciting session today to, look at this in sense of how all of these new technological developments converge, right? IAC, centric security, next generation detection and response, confidential computing at the edge, SASE to protect access to and through the edge. And then if we double click one more time on SDP, what's going to happen from a technological development in sense of being able to, provide strong protective mechanisms for payload and for transport. And that's really what it's about today. And with that, Junaid, I'm handing over to you. Thank you very much.
So, Alex, while we have you, so this is live TV, as it were, and let me ask Alex a question which he doesn't know anything about. This is not canned. So, one of the questions, Alex, people ask me as a security architect is, they're saying, all these technologies, what's so special about Verizon? And the thing I tell is, one of our big investments is getting all these technologies to work together. And I know that's been something close to your heart on orchestration and management. And before we transition to quantum key distribution and the bottom of the stack, it would be great if you could share with the audience your thoughts on how the management of all of this complexity is key to making it working, because I know this is where you've actually done a lot of original work yourself, and I think it'd be great if the audience could hear from the, one of the one of the people at Verizon who's actually driving a large-scale orchestration.
Well, let me. So first of all, thank you for the question, and luckily it's a question I think I can answer, although we didn't prepare for it. But look at SASE. If you read the SASE specs that are currently out there, or if you read the Gartner papers around SASE, then they're talking about an outcome, right? They talk about deeply integrated security network functionality in software at the edge. What they don't talk about, because it's simply early days, is, well, what does this integration actually mean? And this is where you will see over time different permutations of SASE emerge from different vendors and providers as to how effectively they actually integrate network with security and which new capabilities and features arise from that integration. So let's stay, for example, at the edge-enabled threat detection. If we are able to collect high-fidelity data and get good confidence on the indicators of compromise, we are able to utilize what's called SOAR, security orchestration and automated response, to have a playbook basically trigger the response. This is really important to the real-time nature of the use cases we enable with 5G, meaning we want the confidence that there is a machine that is able in near real time to not only detect but also respond to the threat. In order to achieve that, we need low false positives and, as I said, high fidelity of data. The deeper I'm integrated into the whole stack from a security perspective, the more context I can get, right? Because I understand the wider context of what's going on, because I receive data from the network, from logs, from the application, and from the network. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect is my ability to directly reach into the network for response. So the automated response triggered by SOAR is able, with a deeply integrated stack, to directly respond in the network stack. Inject the dynamic access list, reroute traffic in SD-WAN, isolate an endpoint. So this is where on the one hand, we need to drive automation, better quality of data, enriched context for the quality of detection. But the deep integration between security and network on the other end of SOAR will help us to trigger those automated responses that go directly into the network and help us to secure this environment.
Yeah, and that's the sense I get by having you speak about this, and I've heard you speak about this before, is it seems that what we need and what is a fundamental shift in security from products, where a company buys 50 products and maybe tries to get it work and maybe it doesn't, versus a service where everything is fully integrated as a platform. And I think you raised an important point about the analytics. I think one of the benefits of a service provider is they are seeing so many attacks happen simultaneously. They're able to basically correlate them and see, is it a one-off event or is it really a pattern? Is someone really going after America on a large scale?
And you brought up an interesting point at the beginning, security by default, right? So that's a big body of thought, is how much security should we as a service provider embed and provide versus it's being the responsibility of a customer. And and maybe not the best comparison, but for the lack of a better one, you drive on a highway. The operator of the highway, shouldn't be making the operator responsible if you have a car crash, because at the end of the day, you're steering the car, but you want to make sure that the pavement is in a good condition, there are no potholes, there's lighting. So there are certain, environmental protection mechanisms that, give you a base level of security that you can safely drive on the highway. But at one point, the responsibility shifts over to the driver. Now, if you transport this into the network realm, is how much are we doing as Verizon, in providing a safe environment, and how much should the customers do on top in sense of, that last piece of security? So this is where a lot of not only research, but debate is going on in, what are we doing on the individual layers by default as we basically give these abilities to our customers. So what you will see is that some of these features that you see here across these three segments we will build in some basic functionalities as per default into our products, right? Because as you said, security by default, and as I believe that to some degree it is our responsibility to set a high bar of default security and protection. But of course, there's always the I'm driving the car element where responsibility will reside to some degree with the end customer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of like what you're saying, and to paraphrase you a little bit, is about Verizon building a foundation that is secure for the customer to build versus no foundation. You know, like basically writing free,
here's a
free
dirt
on the
road.
open internet.
Yeah, here's a dirt road with potholes every 5 meters, and good luck, right? Yeah,
that's right. And I think that really is a nice segue to this notion of Verizon building a foundation of security. And if you think about foundation, probably the bottom of the layer is fiber, you know, on top of which we build routing. So I'm going to introduce my colleague, Lee Sattler. And as I introduce him to provide a transition between Alex's strategy, you know, for those of you who could see the slide, one of the things that I do in my work is basically make sure Verizon's 5G network is the fastest and most secure in the industry. And I think what Alex said was kind of important. A big part of Alex's thought was integrating security into the fabric so it's already there, secure by default. So one of the things we're doing, and this is original work here at Verizon, this is not from vendor, which is why we're on the 5G Labs channel, is, you know, we're focusing on the end-to-end 5G architecture, which if you're seeing the PowerPoint actually includes everything. So while this looks different than, let me just go backwards to Alex's slide, it in fact is actually everything Alex talked about, but now integrated into the 5G fabric. So, you know, your phone itself would have endpoint protection to detect malware. To make things fast, we'd have network slicing on 5G, connecting to a 5G RAN and core, where we've locked down the software, connecting to our Mech node, and then connecting to our fiber backbone. A different view, if this is hard to understand, is you could think of the network Verizon is building as a stack, right? And Alex has talked about the stack from an orchestration perspective, how there's products through the entire stack, and we're basically managing and monitoring all of them. And Alex also said something important is we're looking at the analytics for all of them. So if you think about the bottom of the stack, to make the network go fast, you know, using fusion splicing instead of mechanical coupling on the fiber, and then quantum key distribution, which we'll talk about in a minute. On top of that, our use of MPLS routing and QoS, and then the way we lock down route tables. On top of that, the Mech architecture and how we have container isolation and SD-WAN routing in the Mech node. On top of that, our RAN and core, which are high performance, and on top of that, what we do in terms of beamforming, which you might have heard the work Verizon's doing in a millimeter wave, which is truly state-of-the-art, and our zero trust architecture. So with that, I'd really like to introduce you to actually one of the smartest people I know at Verizon, Lee, who's our distinguished engineer, who's actually built this. So the important thing I want to share with everybody who's tuning in, as a part of Verizon Labs, we just don't do PowerPoints, which you might think, because you might see PowerPoints. We actually build these networks, and everything Alex has described is actually up and running in the Washington, D.C. area. So with that, I would want to introduce Lee, who's actually got this up and running, to give you a quick overview of what is the which I like to think of the most secure network on the planet, because it's got everything turned on. So Lee, would you please walk our guests through your fantastic architecture?
Sure. But you know what, Junaid, I'm going to be a little bit unpredictable for you today. And we do have this acronym up there, Qrng, and I think before I get into what we did with QKD, I want to talk a little bit about randomness and the importance of randomness. it could be said like the quality of the random numbers used directly determine the security strength of the system. And, you know, this has been talked about in the IETF. They have an RFC for this. This is something that's specified in the Federal Information Processing Specifications 140-2. You know, it's very important to have random input into your cryptology. And you may think, well, you know, I'm doing encryption. I'm using these huge numbers. Where does randomness play in? Is it really a big factor? And actually, it is. And just last December, there was an interesting report from Keyfactor where they went out and looked at these certificates on the internet of about 75 million different certificates. And they found that 1 out of every 172 certificates was vulnerable. And in fact, you know, for in like 18 hours, they were able to crack almost 250,000 RSA keys. And why? Because they had poor random number generation. That was the vulnerability. And the reason I bring this up is because quantum is going to help with this. So let me rephrase what I said first. I said, and say it this way: the quality of the random number generator directly influences how difficult it is to attack the system. And it turns out that in real life, it's very difficult to artificially create randomness for a digital system. And we've tried different things, right? There's the software random number generators, and that's just not enough. And we've started to incorporate external noise into those, but perhaps adversaries could influence that. And so here comes quantum to the rescue. Because the cool thing about quantum is the measurement outcome of a quantum state can be intrinsically random. And that is really cool. That's one of the coolest things about quantum, is it has a lot of these neat little laws and theorems that make it so different from what we're used to. And so there's these quantum random number generators out there that are being used today, and they can do anything from, you know, gigabits per second of pure random numbers that is able to put out output to, you know, just smaller chips that you could put in your phone, chips that you can put in IoT. And I think that, you know, for cryptologists and computer scientists, this is some pretty cool stuff.
So Lee, just building on your thought, you know, before we talk about the fiber and the quantum key distribution, it seems to me that improving the randomness of your existing systems is one of the simplest things corporations can do without even changing their gear. If they can get an external entropy feed into their everything, servers, certificate generation systems, that would you agree that that should be a best practice that people are just missing out on?
Absolutely. You know,
yeah.
As I mentioned, you know, it's in the FIPS guidelines, and the IETF has written about it. I think it's a very simple thing to do, and well worth it. So let's say we've done this though. All right, do we think we're safe now with our encryption that we're using today? And the thing is, maybe we kind of are, because we've got this looming threat in the background, quantum computing. And quantum computing is going to be, I personally think it's going to be amazing. It's going to transform the way that we view the world around us. And it's going to help us solve incredibly large problems, things that we haven't even imagined yet. But one thing that we have imagined, and we know that we can do, is factor prime numbers. The number factorization from Shor's algorithm is something that's going to break the cryptology that we use today. And that's going to be a big deal. But it's, you know, to be fair, it's maybe a decade or so down the pipe, perhaps. Thing is, we're not going to know. We probably aren't going to know when it happens. I mean, I don't expect when somebody gets that capability, they're going to announce it. And you may say that's cool for today, but there are some things that you might be transmitting today that have a long lifetime for the confidentiality, right? You may
and but I guess, Lee, to your point, another thing I think the audience should be aware of is whether or not quantum computers come online to break cryptography. We do have supercomputers, while not as fast as quantum computers, are just as lethal. And to your point, if you combine weak entropy with a supercomputer, that seems like a threat right now that we need to take care of.
Absolutely. And so what are the solutions then? NIST is currently working on post-quantum cryptography. It seems like maybe in 2022 they'll come out with something. And just to be fair, when we look at how long it takes for the internet to deploy new cryptography standards, it can take up to a decade. Right? And even if I put a PQC protocol on my browser today, the website that I go to may not be PQC, and request that I step back down to something like RSA or ECC, something that could be broken by a quantum computer.
Great. So Lee, should we transition to what you've built? So I think I want the audience to sense that as we nerd out here, that which we do all the time. So for those of you listening, and Lee and I talk all the time, the sense I don't want you to get a sense that all we do is talk. We actually built a quantum safe network in the Washington D.C. area that actually has countermeasures to both existing and future attacks all integrated in. So I think, Lee, if you could walk our guests through that, and I'm sure it'll spur some questions. For those of you listening, also, you please feel free to ask questions. I am seeing the Q&As, and once Lee goes through it, we're going to answer questions. So we are having this session for your benefit, so it's rare to get time with Lee, so take advantage of it and ask the hardest questions you can. So with Lee, would you mind walking us through the architecture and what you've built in Washington and how you've configured the system?
Sure. So, down in the bottom left corner, it says 5G Lab. That's actually where I am today, 5G Lab. We have a quantum key distribution device here, and we have another one at our Technology Policy Center at I Street. Between the two, I have a single fiber. And on that single fiber, I have a channel that I've created with wave division multiplexing. And across that channel, I'm sending photons. So there is a photon stream that is coming from L Street over to I Street, going in one direction. We'll call my side Alice, and we'll call I Street Bob. So these photons, they are actually kind of consider them to be a single piece of information. And this is kind of different when you think about when we transmit information or data over fiber today. We're just pulsing that laser on and off, and it's the pulses of the on and off that actually is actually a piece of that information. And there may be millions or billions of photons within that single pulse. Now we've attenuated that laser down to the point where actually a photon is the piece of information that we're sending. So as the photons go across, we do some polarization on them. There's some filtering that goes on each end. I suppose it's analogous to each side flipping a coin, and they each record their results, and then at the end of it, they compare the results, and where the coin flips match, then they keep those and do a little more privacy amplification on it, and they come up with the same string of bits on each side, and that string of bits can be an encryption key. So now we have all these keys, and then it's the same set of keys on each side, and the keys can then be acquired by this device that I'm calling a KME, a key management entity. And we can store terabytes of keys in these key management entities. And really, I mean, when you think about it, it's just like this huge pool of entropy. And you don't have to be an anarchist to appreciate a huge pool of entropy like that. It's just some really neat stuff. And
So one technical question for you. And probably important for the audience. You know, we've heard a lot about entanglement, but I think the important thing is you're able to create copies of keys without the use of entanglement. You're actually using the properties of the photon itself to create a secure link. And we're not reliant, I mean, if we have entanglement, that would be great, but we don't need to wait for entanglement to happen to achieve a secure fiber link.
Exactly right. You know, there's a couple of variations of QKD. Entanglement is one. And I think that as we go into the future and technology gets better, especially when we get to, say, quantum internet, entanglement is going to be maybe one of the, well, I won't say be the relevant one, but it definitely will be one that's available. Okay? So we've created all these keys, and we have our encryptors, which you see on the diagram as the lock and key. So in symmetric encryption, both sides have to have the same key. So all they need to do is ask our KME for a key pair. And the two KMEs will talk to each other and say, use key pair 1. And the encryptors then have their encryption decryption keys, and we can start sending data across it. And in this case, because I'm using wave division multiplexing, I have two other channels on that same fiber. I have one for transmit in one direction and one for that's transmitted in the other direction. So we've actually used wave division to create 3 channels on a single fiber.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is all pretty cool. And the really cool part of it is it's very difficult to get the keys, right? So
yeah,
you know, if I want to get into the middle of this fiber, let's say I was able to do that and I could put a splitter on there and tap off some of the signal. All I would really get is a couple of the photons that are going across. And those photons aren't going to be used in the key generation, so I really have nothing, right? Because if the photon doesn't arrive at the other side, it can't be part of the key.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I would say is you can't split it, right? You can't split a photon. So that's kind of another way that quantum mechanical properties protect this. And furthermore, let's say that I had a magical device there where I could pull the photon off, read it, and then put it back onto the line at the speed of light, right? A man in the middle attack. There's this no cloning theorem. So you can't actually take read the quantum state of a qubit or a photon in this case, and then create a perfect copy. It can't be done because once you've read it, you've changed the properties of it. So it's really provably secure, which is why we think this is a pretty cool technology. Some things to say about it though. Because we've attenuated that fiber so much, and we're just sending these single photons across it. There are going to be distance limitations. Technology today limits us maybe to 100 kilometers. Some vendors have told me they might get up to 500 kilometers one day. And to be fair, I mean, these QKD devices are pretty fresh, right? And as the technology improves, we'll see performance improve. But if you wanted to go further, there are ways to go further. We could put a trusted node in the middle of this QKD link, which does kind of a optical to electrical to optical conversion, but you'll need to secure it. It has to be secure because you don't want anybody messing with your trusted node. Or eventually, there's work being done on quantum repeaters, and you can put a quantum repeater in the middle of it, and quantum internet becomes reality. We'll see a lot of these quantum repeaters out on the quantum internet. In the short term,
mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and you've deployed a zero trust architecture using SDP on top of the quantum network, QKD network, and I know the SDP actually pulls entropy from it. So I think one of the things maybe worth mentioning to our audience is that not only can we create a secure link for the fiber and then use that link to generate entropy and generate keys, but you can also feed entropy into other systems that live on the system higher up on the stack. That, there's actually multiple applications of this.
Yeah, I mean that's the really cool part. So then you look at this next piece down in Ashburn, Virginia. I show a key management entity and an encryptor. So these key management entities are all talking to each other out of band. Here I show that we're talking on the 5G network. And I should say that they're talking using a PQC. And so, as keys can be exchanged securely across that link, when that encryptor in Ashburn wants to talk to one of the other encryptors in DC, it simply talks to its local KME. The KME then talks to the KME at the destination. They agree on a key pair. The encryptors get a key pair, and bam, we have a nice encrypted data session going between now Ashburn and the sites in DC. And it's easy to add in more sites to this. And so and you don't necessarily have to do this out of band, but I think that just, I suppose I'm being a little paranoid, right? And that never hurts. Yeah. It's not that hard. And so that makes it even harder, right? Because if you want to get the key, the session key, you've got to intercept the communication between the KMEs, get that key, and be intercepting the communication between the encryptors at the same time. And you know what? Good luck with that, because I change my keys every minute. So it's not that easy to go back and see what's going on.
So we've got some questions coming in, and for our guests, I would encourage you to put in questions. But some of these questions are great. It looks like there's people who are actually building these systems who have dialed into this webinar, and that's great. I mean, our role here at Verizon 5G Labs is to share information with our customers as we work it out. It's as all our work, our original research work, we love to have our customers know about it. So Lee, let me just ask you some of these questions, and I'm going to just paraphrase them a little bit. One of the questions is, as these great entropy pools are being generated, how is that entropy how can it be used by other systems? And I actually want to build off of what you just said about how the zero trust architecture is able to pull entropy. Could you talk a little bit about linking it to the QRNG calls, the RNG calls in Linux, and how the RNG calls in Linux can be linked to the entropy through the system? As a practical example, if you have a Linux server process, you can basically get an advantage of this kind of transparently.
Yeah, I mean, within the OS, they have their own RNG pool, and it's really not that hard to go into the OS and tune the kernel to use a pool that you're filling up with the entropy, say from a QNRG device. So, and that's something that we actually did, right, Junaid, when we set up our proof of concept with software-defined perimeter. We're sending in a stream from another location across the internet to Junaid's servers, and then they're taking those and putting them into this RNG pool that we modified to take the Qrng feed, which I think is super cool. And then you take that feed and you use it in developing certificates and encryption keys.
So we have two questions which are kind of related. One person asked a question on how do we know the random numbers are really random? And then can we talk about the reliability of these systems? I mean, if we're using them in mission critical systems, if we don't want a failure. So you could, if you could talk about the fact that we can actually have multiple QRNGs or multiple systems running at the same time, so if one fails. But would you talk a little bit first about the how we do statistical analysis on the numbers to ensure that they really are random? In fact, there are some benchmarks around the entropy. If you could speak to that.
Yeah, NIST has some test tools that you can use to test out the randomness, and you can come up with a score that gives you an idea of exactly how random it is. But I'll say this, when you think about your random number generators, you most certainly want to make sure you're getting it from a trusted vendor, because I could create a random stream on my hard drive and just output that, and it will look totally random, but I know what it is. So I don't know, maybe again I'm being paranoid, but something to be aware of is make sure you have good vendors when you get your random generation device.
And then would you talk about the reliability, how we can create backups or run these systems in parallel?
Yeah, I mean I don't think that's too difficult, because you could have two random generation sources, say, sitting behind a load balancer, and it picks up from one, and if the other one goes down, it automatically goes to the other. I don't see any real difficulty in setting something like that up.
For those of you listening in, we at Verizon are very proud of Lee, because we truck him out to the U.S. intelligence community to answer questions on behalf of the company, and no one's been able to ask a question yet to get him stuck. So I did.
Questions.
Yeah, I did a stump the chump joke once with our lawyers and people from the U.S. government, and our lawyers had a heart attack that I would say, all right, let's do this. And they're like, no, let's not do this. but this is a much more informal setting. So a couple of good questions also came in. One person said, is our security to make it quantum safe reliant on quantum computing? And, because you did mention in your comments that we are using quantum effects just like a quantum computer does. But it's a good question, which is, are we reliant on a quantum system working, or is it that our understanding of quantum effects actually allows us to create a quantum safe network even without the quantum computing working? If you could talk to that for a minute. This is a kind of good question.
Sure, no, that's good. Yeah, and so it does not rely on quantum computing. We're relying on the properties of quantum mechanics to secure the system. Certainly, but I will say, I know that it's going to be possible to generate random numbers out of quantum computers one day, just kind of naturally. So eventually, that may be another source of QRNG.
Yeah. So we have more questions coming. Thank you, everybody, for asking questions. This is why we do these sessions and why we love it, because we get to hear exactly what our customers and solution partners want to know. Some kind of questions I'll answer. One question was, do you need a private Mech to do quantum key distribution? The answer is no. So I showed you the architecture slide where we're doing quantum QKD at the bottom of the stack, and then we're doing the MPLS routing and then the Mechs on top. So if you think about it as a stack, we can secure the traffic on a public Mech as well as a private Mech. And one of the things we perhaps will do in a future 5G lab session is we actually have a zero trust architecture running on Verizon's public Mech right now. And it is something we are providing briefings to our larger customers. Unfortunately, Lee's time is busy and it's hard, but perhaps in a future session, if there's interested, there's an email address. Please do email the Verizon Labs team, and we could do a zero trust demo on a public Mech using QRNG. Another question was the Qrng algorithm. Oh, sorry, the acronym. What does it stand for? Let me answer that as well. It just stands for Quantum Random Number Generator. So everybody knows what a random number generator is on a server. The quantum random number generator is something that uses a quantum effect. It could be noise in the universe to generate a stream of numbers, which, as Lee pointed out, which we verify as random. So it's not that we get these numbers and we say, oh, we're done. We actually take large sample sets of these numbers, and as Lee mentioned, there's actually algorithms at the NIST website that you can download for free that lets you look at the randomness. So another thing to do if you're interested, this is kind of very nerdy. This is a real 5G Labs thing. So one good thing that's worth doing is using the entropy calculator on your existing systems and just seeing if your certificates are actually random or not. This is something that's kind of shocking to a lot of IT security teams when they put this PKI infrastructure and they don't realize it's generating the same cert. So the tools are free. I encourage you to download them and try them. Lee, I answered the easy questions. I'm going to give a hard one to you because we are playing Stump the Chump today with Lee. Do you know what the QKD protocol that you're using? One question is it BB84? Let's see if someone has asked Lee a question that he can't answer. So are you familiar with the protocol?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
you guys. Oh my God, you couldn't stump the chump.
Better be, right?
All right.
Yeah, no, BB84 that is correct.
All right. I'd like to thank the audience to try to stump Lee, but it didn't work. So Lee survives yet again. A number of great questions. Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about the QRNG and the vendors? Without naming a vendor, I know everybody in the world who's selling RNGs and KQD systems talks to Lee, and they basically call Lee. Do you have any comments about how the vendors have matured? And we've talked about this, how you've seen a lot of improvement in the systems in the past year. I know there was a big shift between dedicated fiber to fiber being shared, and I think that was pretty significant in your own work. If you could share that with our guests today.
Yeah, as far as QRNG, correct?
But also the KQD system. I remember the first generation systems you were working with at the lab. You had to dedicate a whole fiber, which was kind of problematic. But now you're able to send data and the KQD stream on the same fiber, which I think was a big breakthrough.
Yeah. No, it definitely was. So going to the QRNG question, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking just to stream to some other systems, then you can go and start looking at some of the bigger ones that could be rack mounted. You can get them if you want to put it on an individual server. There's these thumb drives you could put on there, and it will give you quantum random numbers. If you're going for something in IoT, because that's where I kind of have my own concerns about the quality of random number generation in IoT, then start looking at chips, because I think that's a field that really needs to be pushed to bring up the quality of the security in IoT. Mm-hmm. Right. So then when we talk about the QKD that I did, and I told you I did this over a single fiber, which I think was pretty cool. Before this, QKD devices generally had a single fiber that you would use, and you'd call it your quantum channel, and you just send the photons down that channel. And then you would have another set of fibers, just like you would for a normal data circuit. And that's where you would have there's some classical type communication that goes on between the two QKD devices, and that would go on to what we call the classical. So you'd end up really having 3 strands of fiber. Two for the classical communication and 1 to send the photons. So this because dark fiber sometimes is hard to find, and you want to get good quality fibers. You can do 1 fiber. I think that saves a lot.
Now we have a related question on that, which kind of dovetails on your answer. And one question was, did you need a special fiber? And I remember in your work, it wasn't a special fiber, but you did look a lot at the dB loss. Could you kind of share your perspective on, did you need something special, or was it just making sure what you had was of the quality? And you could kind of characterize the quality for our audience?
Sure. I mean, it had to be a single mode fiber for what we were doing just because of distance. Possible to do it perhaps over multi-mode if you're just doing it in your lab. So it's a single mode fiber. We can tolerate maybe at least 18 dB of loss, and that's why we can get out to 100 kilometers or so. I could have easily done QKD between Ashburn and Washington, D.C. I just wanted to demonstrate something a little bit different, which is why I chose the shorter run. But yeah, in any decent fiber, now I'll just kind of make this plug in Verizon. We use fusion splicing, which improves the quality of our fiber. So it wasn't that hard to find a good fiber. We didn't really have to do any conditioning, but if you do purchase dark fiber, you certainly want to make sure that their tests are run to verify the quality. There may be patch panels that need to be changed out or something like that, but in this case, we didn't need any modifications.
Yeah, let me, some more questions. One is, I'm going to paraphrase the question a little bit. It has to do with mobile devices, and does QKD run to the mobile device? The answer is no. The way to think about it is think about the fiber infrastructure, at the backbone network, and we're locking that down, and then we're locking down the control elements, and the control elements, when they need to generate keys or they need to generate certs, they're pulling from this backbone, which is secure, which allows us then to create mobile services, 4G and 5G services that have a foundation of security. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So Alex Schleger, when he spoke in his opening comments, I think one of the things he said that was important in his opening comments is Verizon's idea of secure by default is this notion of raising the foundation, right? So what we're trying to do here is, instead of having a foundation, of zero, we're trying to have a very strong floor on which to build enterprise services, allow our big companies Fortune 500 companies to transit, but also then build secure 4G and 5G services. So a lot of what we're doing in today's session is giving you a behind-the-scenes look at the kind of work we do at Verizon that is unique to us. Usually we are careful about talking a lot about all the countermeasure work we do, but this is to give you a flavor of the work, the very deep work we do, and the thing that we actually build these systems and test them. When someone says, here's a great idea, we actually verify everything from scratch, build it all in-house to make sure it's really says what it does, but more importantly, figure out how to integrate it into other systems. Now with Lee, I think one thing that would help in the last few minutes is, as a part of the demo, I know you built higher layer systems like streaming video to show how that could use this. And I think in one of your video demos, you can also show where I think if there's a breach, the video breaks up. Could you talk a little bit about some of the things you added to this network to basically showcase this for our guests who are listening in today?
Sure. So what I did on that QKD fiber, I put a remote attenuator, and so I was which was going to simulate a hacker trying to get in and peel off a little bit of the signal, and I only peel off a little bit, maybe one or two dBm, which is not a lot, but it's enough to get a couple of photons out of it. And on the other end, we have our management system for the QKD, and it's monitoring the key generation rate. And we can actually see when somebody starts to peel off some of the signal, because of course it's going to affect the key generation rate, which can raise an alarm, and that alarm can then be used, then take action on it. find out who's trying to get into your circuit. And at the same time, I can be showing a video. The thing is, if you're only peeling off a few dBm of this circuit, the video continues on just fine. I mean, there's no impact to the video at all. So here we had somebody trying to be really sneaky and just get after some of the keys, and it was not successful, and it didn't really impact the video, but we detected it.
So we're just running out of time. We have a chance for one last question. I do want to respond to one question. Someone says, "Are you hiring?" And the answer is, if you're smart enough to work with Lee, we will hire you. But the bar is pretty high. You know, you're going to have to withstand an interview with Lee, so you'll need to study a lot. But our last question, which is kind of an interesting one, you know, we've talked about how we've got the KQD system and how we use the security to propagate out in your demo over 5G to another facility, right? This is actually an interesting question because it's an obvious one. Is there a limit to the propagation of the security features out? I mean, this is kind of a blue sky question. That's a kind of a theoretical one, which is, you know, how far can we propagate out? Is there a scale limit? And actually, I don't even know the answer myself, but I don't want to say someone has stumped us, but it's an interesting theoretical one, which is what's the ratio between a secure KQD network and the maximum span? That's not the question, but my mind is jumping to that. Do you have any thoughts on that? It'll be our last question.
Yeah, I think distance is not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
The number of devices at some point, you know, we start putting hundreds of devices out there. How big is our entropy pool? Are we generating enough keys? That's the only issue.
Yeah, great. I would like to thank our guests for joining this Verizon 5G Lab sessions. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've got enjoyed the little behind-the-scenes peek at what we do at Verizon every day to make to build really the most secure network and the highest performance network in the world. This is a weekly webcast. I would encourage you to join in. If you have interest in quantum security, I think there's a way to email our 5G Labs team. Please do email them. If this is an interesting topic to you, we can have follow-up sessions on quantum safe zero trust. We're also working on cool millimeter wave technology, the kind of state of the art. So a lot of fantastic things at Verizon. Thank you for joining, and stay safe.